The gentle hum of the quantum-fold drive filled the bridge of the stellar dawn. Captain Andrew Peters stood at the observation window, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The stars stretched endlessly before him, each one holding the promise of humanity's greatest adventure yet. "Captain," Lisa Morrison called from her science station, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and concern. "I'm picking up some unusual energy readings." Her fingers danced across the holographic display, bringing up streams of data that seemed to defy everything she knew about physics. Andrew walked over to her station, his boots making soft thuds against the polished floor. "What kind of readings, Chief Morrison?" "It's like nothing we've ever seen before," she said, pointing to a pattern that pulsed with an impossible rhythm. "The energy signature keeps changing, but there's a pattern to it. It's too regular to be natural, but too complex to be from any known source." The captain nodded slowly, years of experience telling him this could be the moment they'd all been waiting for. "How far?" "About 3 light minutes ahead of us," Lisa replied, adjusting her readings. "Whatever it is, it's massive." Andrew pressed the ship-wide comm button on the nearest panel. "All hands, this is the captain. We may have our first contact situation. I want everyone at their stations and ready for anything. This is what we trained for." The bridge crew worked with focused efficiency. Engineer Jennifer Walsh ran another diagnostic on the quantum-fold drive, making sure they could make a quick escape if needed. Lieutenant Daniel Carter checked and rechecked their defensive systems, though everyone hoped they wouldn't be necessary. "Visual range in 30 seconds. Lisa announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The massive view screen at the front of the bridge flickered to life, and everyone fell silent. Against the backdrop of space floated what could only be described as a crystal palace. The vessel, if that's what it was, seemed to be made entirely of geometric shapes that shouldn't have been possible in 3-dimensional space. Every surface reflected the starlight in perfectly calculated patterns, creating an effect that was both beautiful and somehow unsettling. "It's at least 3 times our size," Daniel reported from his station. "And those patterns, they're changing, but with perfect mathematical precision." Before anyone could respond, a beam of pure white light shot from the crystalline vessel, stopping just short of the stellar dawn. The beam spread out, forming a perfect dodecahedron of energy around their ship. "We're being scanned," Lisa said, checking her instruments. "The energy field isn't harmful, but it's cataloging us. Every atom, every molecule." Andrew straightened his uniform. "Open all frequencies for communication. Let's introduce ourselves." The response came almost instantly. The view screen filled with an image that made several crew members gasp. The beam before them appeared to be made of the same crystalline material as their ship, but it moved with fluid grace. Its form shifted between perfect geometric shapes, each transformation following mathematical rules that seemed to exist just beyond human comprehension. "We are the Ordinus," the being spoke, its voice a harmony of mathematical frequencies. "Your vessel introduces chaos into the ordered universe. This is concerning." Andrew stepped forward, keeping his voice calm and diplomatic. "I am Captain Andrew Peters of the Earth vessel Stellar Dawn. We are on a peaceful mission of exploration." The crystalline being's form pulsed with what might have been agitation. "Your quantum fold drive violates 17 universal constants. Your ship's design lacks perfect symmetry. Your very bodies contain elements of randomness that should not be possible in an ordered universe. Explain." Lisa couldn't help but smile at the aliens' apparent distress over their lack of perfection. She stepped forward, datapad in hand. "Perhaps we could exchange scientific information. Our understanding of the universe might be different from yours, but that doesn't make it wrong." The being's form shifted rapidly through a series of increasingly complex shapes. "Your statement contains both logic and chaos. This should not be possible. We must study this anomaly." More crystalline beings appeared on the screen, their forms moving in perfect synchronization, as they discussed something in frequencies too perfect for human hearing to process. Finally, the first being spoke again. I am designated perfect symmetry. Our council has determined that your species represents a paradox that must be understood. You appear to function despite your chaotic nature. This defies all known universal laws. Andrew saw an opportunity. We would be happy to share knowledge with you. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting between our peoples. The crystalline beings vibrated in what might have been distress, physical proximity to such chaos, yet the potential data. Acceptable. We will establish a controlled environment for interaction. Over the next few hours, both ships worked to create a meeting space. The Ordinus insisted on perfect geometric arrangements for everything, while the human crew found themselves constantly apologizing for their chaotic biological needs like breathing and maintaining non-perfect body temperatures. As Andrew prepared to lead the first delegation to meet the Ordinus in person, Lisa pulled him aside. Captain, these beings, they're incredible. Their understanding of universal constants, their technology, it's all based on perfect mathematical harmony. But they seemed genuinely disturbed by us. Andrew straightened his uniform one last time, smiling slightly. Well, Chief Morrison, maybe that's exactly why we needed to meet. Sometimes the universe needs a little chaos to make things interesting. As the delegation prepared to board the shuttle, Andrew couldn't help but feel that humanity had just stumbled upon something bigger than first contact. They had discovered a fundamental truth about their own nature. In a universe divided between order and chaos, humanity somehow managed to be both. The shuttle departed the stellar dawn, heading toward the crystalline vessel that gleamed like a mathematician's dream made real. As they approached, Andrew watched the perfect patterns shift and flow across its surface. He couldn't help but wonder what changes this meeting would bring to both species. After all, when order met chaos incarnate, the only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same again. Lieutenant Daniel Carter stood perfectly still, trying not to disturb the precise geometric patterns that covered the floor of the meeting chamber. Perfect Symmetry had spent exactly 23 minutes arranging everything in the room according to what they called universal harmonics. Even the chairs were set at perfect angles to each other. Your breathing is irregular, Perfect Symmetry noted, their crystalline form shifting through a series of complex shades. It lacks mathematical consistency. Daniel fought back a smile. That's because humans breathe according to our needs, which change moment by moment. The concept seemed to cause the alien visible distress. Their surface rippled with discordant patterns. How do you function without precise scheduling of biological processes? We adapt, Daniel explained, watching as Perfect Symmetry recorded every word into what appeared to be a crystal data cube. Humans are good at adjusting to changing situations. The meeting chamber hummed with soft energy as more Ordinus observers entered. They arranged themselves in a perfect hexagon around Daniel, their forms synchronized in movement and color. Each one held a similar crystal cube, ready to document every chaotic human action. Back on the stellar dawn, Lisa Morrison worked with the Ordinus science team to compare their different technologies. The aliens had been horrified to learn that human computers used binary code, which they considered primitively linear. Their own systems operated on what they called perfect state mathematics, where all calculations happened simultaneously in geometric harmony. But how do you account for unexpected variables? Lisa asked, genuinely curious. She pointed to their star charts, which showed perfectly plotted courses through space. What happens if something unpredictable appears in your path? The Ordinus scientists vibrated in unified confusion. The universe follows perfect laws. Nothing is unpredictable if one's calculations are correct. Lisa brought up records from Earth's space exploration history. Look at these meteor strikes, solar flares, and gravitational anomalies we've encountered. They didn't follow expected patterns. The Ordinus spent several minutes processing this information, their crystalline forms clouding slightly. Finally, one spoke. Your records must be flawed. Such deviations from universal constants are impossible. Nothing's impossible, Lisa said with a gentle smile. That's one of humanity's core beliefs. We see the unexpected as a chance to learn something new. Meanwhile, Captain Andrew Peters met with the Ordinis High Observer in what they called the Symmetry Chamber. The room was a perfect sphere, with surfaces that shifted and flowed in endless mathematical patterns. Andrew tried to focus on the conversation while ignoring the dizzying display around him. Your species continues to defy our understanding, the High Observer stated. They form a complex arrangement of intersecting geometric shapes. You acknowledge universal constants, yet constantly seek to bend them. You recognize patterns, yet deliberately introduce variables. You are aware of perfect order, yet choose to embrace chaos. Andrew considered his words carefully. We believe that progress often comes from challenging what we think we know. Sometimes the best solutions aren't the most obvious ones. The High Observer's form briefly lost its perfect symmetry, something that caused the other Ordinis in the room to emit frequencies of distress. You suggest that imperfection can lead to advancement. This contradicts all known laws of development. Back in the main meeting chamber, Daniel was demonstrating human problem-solving to the increasingly agitated Ordinis observers. They had presented him with what they considered a simple geometric puzzle, one with a mathematically perfect solution that would take exactly 2,348 steps to complete. Daniel solved it in 7 moves by turning the entire puzzle on its side. Perfect symmetry's form actually shattered briefly before reforming. This solution is not listed in the approved approaches. It violates the fundamental rules of the exercise. But it worked, Daniel pointed out. Sometimes the best path to order is through apparent chaos. This statement caused such distress among the Ordinis that they called for an emergency meeting of their council. The humans were politely but firmly asked to return to their ship while the Ordinis processed this potentially universe-altering concept. As the human delegation regrouped on the stellar dawn, they shared their experiences. Lisa brought up the scientific data she'd gathered, showing it to Captain Peters on the bridge's main screen. Their technology is amazing, she explained, but it's also limiting. They can't handle anything that doesn't fit their predetermined patterns. Look at their space travel records. They've actually avoided exploring entire sectors because the chaos of forming stars doesn't fit their mathematical models. Andrew nodded, watching the crystalline ship through the view screen. Its perfect surfaces seemed less imposing now, more like a beautiful cage than a symbol of advancement. They've built their entire civilization on the idea that the universe can be reduced to absolute rules. Meeting us has forced them to question that belief. Some of them are already starting to change, Daniel added. Perfect symmetry actually made an intuitive decision during our last session. They reached for a data queue without calculating the optimal path first. You should have seen their reaction when they realized what they'd done. The ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Perfect symmetry's image appeared on the screen, their form showing subtle variations that hadn't been there before. We have reached a preliminary conclusion, they announced. Your species represents a paradox that challenges our understanding of universal law. The Council has determined that further study is essential. However, prolonged exposure to human chaos is causing unexpected variations in our younger members' behavior patterns. Andrew leaned forward in his chair. Are these variations harmful? Perfect symmetry paused before responding. Another new behavior. Unknown. They are. Interesting. This response itself is troubling. Interest without mathematical purpose was previously thought impossible. Perhaps, Lisa suggested, this is an opportunity for both our species to grow. We could learn from your understanding of universal patterns, while you could explore the benefits of occasional chaos. The crystalline being's form shifted through a series of asymmetrical patterns before settling. This proposal is both logical and illogical. It is perfectly imperfect. We require time to process these contradictions. As the communication ended, the human crew shared knowing looks. They had achieved something remarkable. They had introduced the concept of beautiful imperfection to a species that worshipped absolute order. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. The alarms on both ships went off at exactly the same moment. On the bridge of the Stellar Dawn, Lisa Morrison's face went pale as she looked at her readings. "Captain, we have a massive gamma-ray burst heading our way. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Captain Andrew Peters immediately activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is not a drill. Battle stations." He turned to his science officer. "How long do we have?" 8 minutes before it hits us," Lisa replied, her fingers flying over her console. "The radiation shielding won't be enough. This burst could tear both ships apart." The main view screen lit up with Perfect Symmetry's image. Their crystalline form was cycling through patterns faster than usual, showing what the humans had learned to recognize as stress. "We have calculated the exact impact of the gamma-ray burst. Our combined survival probability is 0.0004%. "Send us your calculations," Andrew ordered, watching as streams of mathematical formulas appeared on their screens. The Ordinance had mapped out every possible escape route, factoring in ship speeds, shield strengths, and radiation patterns. According to their perfect mathematics, there was no way out. Jennifer Walsh, who had been quietly studying both ships' engine specifications for the past few days, suddenly spoke up from her engineering station. "Captain, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work." "At this point, I'll take crazy," Andrew said, noting how the Ordinance on the screen visibly flinched at the word. Jennifer pulled up a diagram of their quantum fold drive. "The Ordinance ships use perfect mathematical formulas to travel through space. Our drive works by basically punching a hole in reality. What if we deliberately destabilized our drive?" "Destabilize?" Perfect Symmetry's form actually cracked with distress. "Your drive already defies 17 universal constants. Further destabilization would create a massive chaotic event," Jennifer finished. "One big enough to disrupt the gamma-ray burst's path. The Ordinance ship could then use their perfect calculations to ride the shockwave to safety." Lisa quickly ran the numbers. "She's right. The burst pattern would be completely disrupted. But Captain," she hesitated, "deliberately destabilizing the quantum fold drive could tear our ship apart." The bridge fell silent. Perfect Symmetry spoke again, their voice carrying harmonics of confusion. "You would risk certain destruction to create a possibility of survival. This defies all logical protocols. Sometimes you have to roll the dice," Andrew said, already moving toward the engineering station. "Jennifer, what do you need?" "The Ordinance ship's help," she replied. "Their perfect mathematical fields could help contain the chaos once we initiate it, but they have to deliberately work with our chaos, not against it." Perfect Symmetry's form shifted rapidly as they processed this information. "You ask us to embrace chaos, to abandon perfect order." More Ordinance appeared on the screen behind them, their forms showing various states of distress. "This goes against everything we believe." 5 minutes to impact," Lisa announced. Andrew looked directly at the screen. "Perfect Symmetry, you've been studying us for days now. You've seen how chaos and order can work together. Right now, perfect order is telling you we're all going to die. Is that acceptable?" The Ordinance Council chamber erupted in a cascade of crystalline frequencies. Some forms shattered and reformed in patterns of distress. Perfect Symmetry's form kept shifting between perfect geometric shapes and wild asymmetrical patterns. 4 minutes, Lisa said quietly. Jennifer stepped forward. "I can start the drive destabilization now, but without the Ordinance's help to contain it, we'll all be dead before the gamma-ray burst even hits us." Perfect Symmetry suddenly stabilized into a form that was neither perfectly geometric nor chaotic, but somehow both. "I will help. The Council's decision is not yet made, but I choose this." The other Ordinance reacted with shock, their forms becoming completely asymmetrical. Perfect Symmetry ignored them, already sending control protocols to the Stellar Dawn. "What you call rolling the dice, we would call embracing infinite variables. I find I am curious. about the outcome. Jennifer immediately began the destabilization sequence. The ship groaned as the quantum fold drive's containment field started to fluctuate. Warning lights flashed across every console as the laws of physics began to bend around them. 3 minutes, Lisa reported, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Perfect symmetry. We need your containment fields now. The crystalline ship's perfect surface began to ripple as it extended its mathematical fields around both vessels. The Ordinus were using their technology in ways their equations said was impossible, creating patterns that should have collapsed immediately. Drive destabilization at 40%, Jennifer called out. 60% needed for disruption. The ship shuddered violently. On the screen, they could see perfect symmetries form, constantly shifting between order and chaos as they directed their ship's energy fields. Other Ordinus were either helping or fleeing, their rigid society splitting in real time. 2 minutes. Gamma-ray burst expanding faster than predicted. Lisa announced. 50% destabilization, Jennifer reported. Perfect symmetry. We need more power to your containment fields. The crystalline being's response was surprisingly human-like. I am giving it everything we have. Our systems were not designed for this level of improvisation. The stars outside began to distort as space itself warped around the combined effects of human chaos and Ordinus mathematics. Crew members held onto their stations as artificial gravity fluctuated. 1 minute, Lisa said. Drive destabilization. 58%, Jennifer replied through gritted teeth. Come on, come on. Perfect symmetries form suddenly exploded into a shower of crystal fragments, then reformed in a pattern that was beautiful in its imperfection, redirecting power from all non-essential systems, even the ones our equations say are essential. The containment fields flared with impossible energy. Jennifer's console sparked as the quantum fold drive pushed past its limits. 65%. Initiating burst now. Space turned inside out around them. The combined power of human chaos and Ordinus mathematics created something entirely new, a perfect moment of ordered chaos that reached out and split the approaching gamma-ray burst like a cosmic blade. The Ordinus ship, following calculations they were creating in real time, rode the shockwave exactly as Jennifer had predicted. The stellar dawn, its quantum fold drive screaming in protest, surfed the waves of chaos in its wake. When reality finally stabilized, both ships were safely out of the burst's path. The bridge crew of the stellar dawn looked at their instruments in amazement. They had done the impossible. They had survived by breaking all the rules. On the screen, perfect symmetries form had stabilized into something new. They were still crystalline, still geometric, but now their patterns flowed with an organic grace that would have been unthinkable just hours ago. It seems, they said, their voice carrying new harmonics, that we had calculated incompletely. Chaos, when properly applied, can indeed create its own form of order. This will require extensive study. Andrew looked around at his crew, then back at the screen. Perfect symmetry. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. The crystalline being's form sparkled in what might have been amusement. That statement is both logical and illogical. I find I no longer mind a contradiction. Dr. Kevin Roberts hadn't slept in 36 hours. The physicist's desk was covered with data pads showing readings from the gamma-ray burst incident. Perfect symmetry stood nearby, their crystalline form shifting slowly through patterns that seemed more natural than mathematical now. Look at this, Kevin said, pointing to a particular set of numbers. During the crisis, when we combined your mathematical fields with our chaotic drive state, we created something entirely new, something that shouldn't be possible. Yet it existed, perfect symmetry replied. Their voice had changed over the past few days, becoming less rigid and more flowing. Just as your species exists, despite all our calculations saying you should not. Lisa Morrison entered the science lab, carrying fresh data from both ships' sensors. The test results are in, she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. You're going to want to see this. She pulled up a holographic display showing the structure of space itself. Tiny points of light danced and swirled in patterns that were both random and ordered at the same time. "This is incredible," Kevin breathed, watching the display. "The universe, it's not just ordered or chaotic. It's both, all the time." Perfect Symmetry moved closer to the display, their form rippling with interest. "Explain." Lisa adjusted the display to zoom in on the quantum level. "Look here. When we map the basic structure of spacetime, we see perfect mathematical patterns, just like your people always believed in. But between those patterns, in the spaces between spaces, there's pure chaos. And they're not fighting each other. They're dancing. The two forces work together," Kevin added. "Order provides the framework, but chaos provides the energy for change and growth. You can't have one without the other." On the bridge of the Stellar Dawn, Captain Andrew Peters was having a similar conversation with the Ordinis High Observer. The crystalline being's form had changed dramatically since the crisis, now showing flowing patterns within its geometric structure. "Your ship's data records have been enlightening," the High Observer said. "We have spent millennia seeking perfect order, yet our own universe appears to require chaos to function." Andrew nodded, watching the stars through the view screen. "And humanity somehow evolved to reflect that balance. We create order out of chaos and find chaos within order. It's what makes us who we are." Back in the science lab, Kevin was explaining his theory to an ever-growing audience of humans and Ordinis. "Think about it. Every major breakthrough in human history came from someone breaking the established patterns. We succeed because we can see the order in things, but we're not bound by it. Your quantum fold drive," Perfect Symmetry said slowly, "it doesn't break universal constants at all, does it? It works because it embraces both aspects of reality." "Exactly." Lisa brought up the drive schematics. "We didn't know it, but we designed it to work with both the mathematical order of space and the chaos between dimensions. That's why it looked so wrong to your sensors. You were only seeing half of what it was doing." The news spread quickly through both ships. Young Ordinis, particularly those who had helped during the crisis, began experimenting with less rigid forms. Some even started attempting to make intuitive decisions rather than purely calculated ones. Not everyone was happy about these changes. A group of elder Ordinis called for an immediate end to all contact with humans, fearing the spread of chaos through their society. But they were too late. The transformation had already begun. Perfect Symmetry gathered a group of both species in the main conference room of the Stellar Dawn. Their form now flowed constantly between patterns, beautiful in its combination of structure and freedom. "I have made an unprecedented decision," they announced. "I have chosen to continue studying humanity without calculating the outcome. This choice is both terrifying and exhilarating." One of the younger Ordinis, who had started calling themselves Free Pattern, moved forward. "Many of us have been experiencing similar desires. We find ourselves drawn to explore possibilities beyond our calculations." Lisa smiled, remembering how rigid and frightened the Ordinis had been during their first meeting. "You're not losing your order," she assured them. "You're just discovering that there's more than one way to create it." In the ship's recreation area, Daniel Carter was teaching a group of curious Ordinis about human games. They were particularly fascinated by dice. "Each roll follows mathematical probability," one Ordinis observed, watching the dice tumble. "Yet the specific outcome cannot be perfectly calculated. This is like life itself." Daniel grinned. "Now you're getting it. Sometimes the fun is in not knowing exactly what's going to happen next." The biggest surprise came when Kevin demonstrated his findings to the Ordinis Science Council. He showed them how their own technology, which they had always believed worked through perfect mathematical harmony, actually utilized chaotic quantum fluctuations without their knowledge. "Your ships don't just impose order on space," he explained. "They sing with it, dance with it, embracing both its structure and its wildness. You've been doing it all along. You just didn't let yourselves see it." Perfect Symmetry, watching the presentation, experienced something entirely new. They laughed. The sound was like crystal wind chimes in a storm, ordered and chaotic all at once. "We thought we were bringing order to chaos," they said, their form shimmering with amusement. "But perhaps we were really bringing the two forces into balance, just as your species does naturally." As the day drew to a close, Andrew stood in his ready room, looking out at the crystalline ship nearby. Its surface still showed perfect geometric patterns, but now they flowed and shifted like waves on an ocean. Lisa joined him, holding a data pad with her latest findings. "It's beautiful, isn't it? The way they're changing, growing. They're not giving up who they are. They're becoming more of who they always were." Perfect Symmetry told me something interesting, Andrew said. "They said that after the crisis, many young Ordinists reported experiencing something they'd never felt before. Hope. Not calculated probability, not mathematical certainty, but actual hope for an undefined future." "Well," Lisa replied with a smile, "when order meets chaos incarnate, amazing things can happen." Outside the window, stars twinkled in their ancient dance of physics and probability, order and chaos, each force strengthening the other in an eternal cosmic ballet that humanity had somehow always understood in their bones. The Stellar Dawn's observation deck was crowded with both humans and Ordinists as Captain Andrew Peters waited for the High Council's final decision. After 3 weeks of intense discussion, debate, and study, the Ordinists were ready to make their official statement about humanity. Perfect Symmetry stood beside Andrew, their crystalline form now a constant flow of geometric patterns that somehow looked both ordered and natural. "No matter what they decide," they said softly, "everything has already changed." The main screen lit up with the image of the High Council chamber. The eldest Ordinists sat in their traditional perfect hexagon arrangement, but Andrew noticed something different about them. Their forms were no longer rigidly geometric. Each one showed subtle variations in their patterns. "We have reached our conclusion regarding the human species," the first speaker announced. Their voice carried both mathematical precision and a new kind of warmth. "After careful study and recent events, we hereby classify humanity as a paradox species." Lisa Morrison, standing nearby with her ever-present datapad, smiled at the term. The Ordinists had spent days trying to find the right classification for humans, struggling to define a species that somehow embodied both chaos and order. The first speaker continued, "Furthermore, we have determined that this paradox is essential to the universe itself. Our understanding was incomplete. The cosmos requires both forces to function properly." Jennifer Walsh leaned over to Daniel Carter and whispered, "Did they just admit they were wrong about something?" Daniel nodded, grinning. That alone was a massive change in Ordinist behavior. "Therefore," the first speaker said, "we propose a joint mission of exploration. Our two species together represent the fundamental forces of reality. It is logical and intuitive that we should explore the universe as one." A murmur of excitement ran through the observation deck. Andrew stepped forward. "We would be honored to join forces with you. What exactly are you proposing?" The screen split to show technical diagrams. "We wish to redesign the Stellar Dawn, combining our technologies properly this time. No more forcing order upon chaos or trying to contain chaos within order. Instead, we will create something new, a ship that embraces both aspects of reality." Perfect Symmetry moved closer to the screen, their form shimmering with what humans had learned to recognize as excitement. "I request permanent assignment to this mission." The council chamber erupted in a cascade of crystalline harmonics. This was unprecedented. No Ordinist had ever requested an assignment based on personal desire before. The first speaker's form shifted through several patterns before settling. "Granted," they said finally. "Your unique experience with human chaos makes you ideally suited for this role. Additionally," they paused, as if still adjusting to using informal language, "you seem to enjoy it." Over the next few days, both crews worked together to begin the ship modifications. The Ordinus brought their perfect mathematical principles to the design, while the humans added their intuitive understanding of how to bend rules without breaking them. Kevin Roberts worked closely with the Ordinus engineers, helping them understand how to blend their technologies. See, your mathematical fields don't need to fight against our quantum fluctuations, he explained. They can dance together like they do in nature. The young Ordinus were particularly enthusiastic about the project. Many had started experimenting with what they called controlled chaos, making small, intuitive decisions within their mathematical framework. Some had even started telling jokes, though their humor tended to involve complex geometric puns that only Lisa seemed to understand. In the ship's new communal area, designed to accommodate both species' needs, Daniel was teaching another group of Ordinus about human music. They were fascinated by how it combined mathematical patterns with emotional expression. The notes follow clear rules. One Ordinus observed, their form swaying slightly to the rhythm, but the way they are arranged creates feelings that cannot be calculated. Like your quantum fold drive, it is perfectly imperfect. Jennifer spent long hours in engineering, working with both human and Ordinus teams to create something entirely new. The quantum fold drive was being rebuilt from the ground up, this time deliberately designed to work with both order and chaos. It's like we've been trying to clap with one hand all this time, she explained to Perfect Symmetry. Now we're finally bringing both hands together. A month after the Council's decision, the redesigned ship was ready. It looked unlike anything either species had created before. The hull somehow managed to be both geometrically precise and organically flowing. The bridge combined Ordinus crystal technology with human intuitive interfaces. Even the ship's name was a blend of both cultures. They called it the Harmony of Discord. On launch day, Andrew stood on the new bridge, looking around at his combined crew. Humans and Ordinus worked side by side at each station, their different approaches to problems now seen as an advantage rather than a conflict. Captain Perfect Symmetry called from their position as first officer. All systems are reporting ready. Both ordered and chaotic components are in balance. Andrew smiled at the subtle humor in their voice. Take us out, nice and easy. Let's see what order and chaos can do together. A Harmony of Discord lifted smoothly from its dock. Its new engines hummed with a sound that was both mathematically perfect and wonderfully wild. As they cleared the space dock, Lisa called out from her station. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up something interesting. It looks like, well, according to both our readings and the Ordinus calculations, it should be impossible. Impossible. Andrew and Perfect Symmetry said simultaneously, sharing a knowing look. Seems like the perfect place to start, Andrew continued. Helm, set a course. Let's see what other impossibilities are out there waiting for us. As the ship moved gracefully into quantum fold, its wake patterns were beautiful enough to make even the most rigid Ordinus appreciate chaos, and ordered enough to make even the most impulsive human appreciate mathematics. In its heart, where human chaos and Ordinus order merged, something new continued to grow, a deeper understanding of how the universe really worked. The stars streaked past the view screen in patterns that were both random and precise, much like the crew that now sailed among them. Humanity had not just proven itself to the Ordinus. They had helped an ancient and advanced species discover a part of themselves they never knew was missing. Perfect Symmetry, watching the star patterns, spoke quietly. You know, there is an old Ordinus saying, the universe tends toward perfect order. I think we need to add to it now. And perfect order is incomplete without a touch of chaos. Andrew nodded, looking out at the infinite possibilities before them. I couldn't have calculated it better myself, he said with a grin. The Harmony of Discord sailed on into the unknown, carrying with it the promise of a future where order and chaos danced together in perfect imperfection, each making the other stronger, each making the universe more complete.